Okay, the recording started, so this is officially welcome to everybody. We'll kick off in just a moment, I guess. So to recap for the YouTube viewers, my name's Ben. I'm from Data Orchard. I'm chairing this session, and then we have three panel members. Very briefly, they are Sally Kerr from Scottish Government, Robert Steele from Reigate and Banstead Borough Council, and Jonathan McDougall from Stirling Council. And I won't say any more about that because I'm asked them to just spend a few minutes talking about themselves and their experience of assessing data maturity in their organisation, and maybe any recommendations they might have to someone in a public body who's thinking about undertaking a data maturity assessment. So we'll ask them to introduce themselves and then we'll get into a bit of a discussion. So could we ask Sally to go first?
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes. So as Ben said, my name's Sally Kerr. I'm the data transformation lead in Scottish Government. I work in the technical data policy team in the data division in the digital directorate in Scottish Government. But as I put in the chat, I have many years experience of working in local government prior to this role. So I've been working with Shona Nichol, who's the team lead in the area I work in, for a number of years to build understanding and development of data maturity in the Scottish public sector. We're looking for long-term conditions for the Scottish public sector, so to be more data mature, more responsive, better informed, better prepared, basically helping the sector to improve service delivery, be more transparent and be more innovative. To help achieve this, we're developing a data transformation framework. The framework is about improving data capability and the process to becoming a data fluent organisation. The framework is also to help organisations understand not only where they are currently in terms of data maturity, but how they can improve, realising more value from their data. So basically, it's a big programme of change where we help organisations think about data and value their data assets in a better way. So we've been running a data maturity programme as the core for our development work. Our first cohort, it's a cohort approach, ran last year with 7 public sector organisations, and we have 10 involved in the current cohort, which is due to finish next month, and hopefully a third taking place in autumn of this year. Each project supports, as I say, a number of organisations, and we ask participants to tackle 3 key tasks, which is determining their own objectives around data. So that's where do they want to be, undertaking a data maturity assessment, so that's where are they now, and then identifying actions required to improve their data maturity, how are they going to get there. So we use outcomes-based planning for this. We provide support to participants with workshops, one-to-one sessions and speaker sessions to address key challenges and raise awareness on core topics such as the foundations required for data maturity to move forward in an organisation. So that those 4 foundations we have recognised as leadership, strategy, data discovery and data governance. Scottish Government gains a lot of learning and recommendations that inform the design of key elements in the framework. As I've discussed already, we learn from the cohort themselves, but also the results of their data maturity assessments. And we're currently developing pathways for data governance, data standards, data literacy, as well as working on CivTech challenge. I can explain more about that if anyone's interested, to make data discovery easier. So I think the other point Ben asked me to talk about was what would I recommend to someone in a public body who's thinking of undertaking a data maturity assessment. First thing I'd say is I'd be really happy to introduce you to one of the organisations from our cohorts to have a conversation with. This would help you understand more about carrying out an assessment, but it would also get an understanding firsthand of the challenges and the benefits of doing this. With our cohorts, we want to be sure they get the most they can from this work. And we ask them to consider a number of things first. So I would also say this to people considering, anyone considering an assessment. So things like, what's the problem they're trying to solve and what's their ambition for the work? It's important to understand if an assessment is going to actually help, and if you have sufficient data awareness in your organisation to carry out an assessment successfully. Is it part of a larger transformation programme? Is it a targeted piece of work? There are really a lot of questions to ask before somebody dives into an assessment. But I would say that raising awareness is key before you do any work like this. You need to build the awareness first, and you do need to consider whether colleagues will understand what you're trying to achieve. Of course, an assessment is a really good way to open up conversations like this and can lead to the development of an organisational plan. So actually, I think I've just contradicted myself and said that an assessment would be good anyway for you to try, as long as you're prepared for the work involved. I think that's me, Ben. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, some really interesting stuff in there. I have some questions which I'll come back to. And if you out in the audience have some questions, please put them in the Q&A. Yeah, we'll ask Rob now to do the same thing, introduce himself, and then talk a bit about his experience and any recommendations he might have.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben. So I'm Rob, and I work at Reigate and Banstead Borough Council, which is a council in the middle of Surrey, so just south of London, and I'm the Data and Insight Manager. And I think what I can give today is probably a lower tier local government kind of district council experience, which may be suitable for sort of a similar smaller organisation or charity, non-profit. And so I started at the organisation, and we knew we had lots of data, and we were doing the basics. We were reporting, we were observing legislation, and kind of capturing client circumstances, all your very basics with data, but we really weren't utilizing it particularly well in an opportunistic way. So I don't think we were innovating or kind of solving bigger challenges using our data. Decisions were founded on kind of assumption and instinct rather than data and research, and we began to sort of turn that round using kind of constructs like the data maturity assessment. So kind of as a small place, we didn't have dedicated business improvement functions or kind of research teams, but we did have a few individuals that kind of held the torch for data, you know, at the time. One of those was the GIS function, so kind of like a mapping specialism, geospatial. And that area became kind of the nucleus for attracting support and showcasing the value of data. You know, when you can produce a map that illustrates something that's a sort of complex area, I think that became sort of a captivating thing. But off the back of that, we had one particular project came to mind around a boundary review. It's not a great, interesting subject, but it did involve a lot of impact on the authorities, really senior people, and was a hard challenge. And we solved it with a sort of data and technology. And I think that really began to kind of build interest, as well as obviously the benefits perhaps of relying upon data during COVID. So things began to align. We had hooks in our corporate plan, and eventually I was able to sort of articulate this in a project brief, which was approved. And hence we got a transformation team that I lead, and our remit is to kind of look at new ways of working with data, but in a coordinated way than just the sort of 5, 6, 7 of us that used to kind of have individual roles. First stage for us was to develop a way in which we could assess the maturity of our organization. We called it, I think, a data landscape assessment, but it was just really to understand kind of where are we. And I wanted to kind of educate users that it wasn't about kind of the number of databases you have or the quality of your IT equipment, or particularly how well you lock up your data and comply with legislation. That's important, but it should be put in balance with opportunistic use of data. So I was really keen to broaden their sights of that, such that we recognize the utility of the information to us, and critically that it was kind of a multi-dimensional thing. So they would have assumed that if we've got high technology capabilities, you know, perhaps we've done the data thing, unbeknown that, you know, the cultural, the leadership, the skills, ever so important as well. So a data maturity assessment was really great for us. In that sense, it put us on that spectrum of data maturity somewhere. We knew broadly where we were, and not just organizationally, but I think, you know, at a directorate level, we're able to get an idea of where there's strengths and weaknesses too. So that research then gave us a conversation starter. We were able to raise the profile of our team and what we do through all staff briefings and through governance groups and management teams and so forth. And I think what was really powerful there is we surveyed the workforce kind of in a bottom-up sense. So managers were able to kind of get an idea of how important data was to their staff and kind of build their own kind of confidence and trust in it that way. So, you know, we weren't just speaking with managers as to what they think we should do with data. We spoke to the whole workforce, and that worked really well, blown away by the interest. So we could begin to measure things as well that were perhaps less quantifiable, you know, through this sort of maturity assessment. We're able to understand our propensity and tolerance for sort of risk and innovation and collaboration as well. So really important things beyond, like I say, just the technological. But in terms of kind of recommendations for anyone else, perhaps of a similar size to us, that are pursuing a data maturity assessment, then I would say that clarify your definition of data early on. Make sure it kind of fits your organization. I came from another organization and kind of brought with me my definition of data. Didn't quite chime here. We're a little bit more operational focused, and I hadn't quite tuned everybody's vision of data into the sort of same thing. You know, it's beyond just reports and whatnot. Get a senior level stakeholder, you know, someone that's really going to kind of bang the drum for data and doing the utilization side of it well. Not your CIRO, not your senior risk officer who will advocate locking it up perhaps, but make sure that they're aware that there's someone as well arguing the point of utilizing that to solve your challenges. And then my other advice would be probably to kind of think about the so what question, because straight away after you deliver the research, there'll be your senior managers will be, well, what do we do about it? So kind of align a whole array of things that you can bring forward in terms of examples and possibly your own case studies and projects that you'll be able to showcase that value of data. And finally, just to begin to collate a list of kind of advocates across the authority. I mean, we found that doing a transformation thing around data was similar to digital transformation, which meant that our organizational development teams were keen to you know, kind of look at the sort of staff capability, workforce data literacy at the same time as we're trying to sort of educate the virtues of data and research approaches. So yeah, I think that's sort of summarizing a little bit of my experiences, but I look forward to your questions as we go through.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. Yes, I've got post-it notes flying all over my desk. So finally, let's ask Jonathan to tell us his experience from Stirling Council.
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan McDougall, data architect within Stirling Council, and I will have to thank Sally and Robert for probably most of my introduction, because there will be a lot of common themes that will come through with this. So as much as my job title does say data architect, my background is GIS, and I think for anybody that has experience within GIS, we know that we strive for good data, consistent data and clean data. The team I reside in, which is performance data and research, it's a team that was really formed within our authority just on the cusp of lockdown in 2020. I think we only actually met as a team once prior to lockdown. So yeah, we're very new team, very new concept for a particular authority. And what we found over time, and as we know, this is a very common discussion that's happened across a lot of organizations and authorities, that data all of a sudden became a very hot topic. And equally with that particular hot topic, it became, you know, more and more desirable. It was the element that local authorities were striving for, to make decisions, make judgments, you know, provide support to our communities, deliver continued support as well to our most vulnerable communities. And that increasingly brought, you know, data to the fore. So what we experienced as a particular team was that, you know, the demand for our team was ever increasing. However, you know, it was bringing up particular issues with regards to data quality, the standards of data across the authority, and really how fragmented overall our approach, you know, was and still exists, you know, with regards to data. over the period of time, and again, thank you to Sally and Shona and our team, we became aware of data maturity, and we were initially, I'd hoped to be one of the first cohort within Sally and Shona's project, but particular pressures took us out of that particular round at the time. However, the conversation regarding data persisted. So as a team and as a particular service, we really struggled with, how can we actually engage with our wider services? How can we, start to solve and rationalize the issues that we faced, during the last 3 years? And really, again, data maturity came to the fore, and, we had to, look at how are we going to communicate, how are we going to engage. So we spoke with Libby and Sian from Data Orchard, again, aware of the particular product, and we took the approach that we're going to use a data maturity assessment as a first step. This was really much about generating conversations within our services, introducing ourselves as well as a team, introducing the concepts of data standards and data maturity. And in terms of the product of Data Orchard itself, it's a very accessible product. It's very easy to communicate and relate to services. So we took the approach that we basically had face-to-face meetings with around 40 services and teams within the local authority, taking them through the data maturity assessments, looking at the particular results, and then having a series of sessions with them to discuss, what was actually, coming through from the results of the assessments themselves. And at this moment in time, we're basically creating a number of reports to go back to the services, looking at not only recommendations, but ways forward. We're not at particular stages of local authority where, as much as we have on the radar, looking at how do we take, let's say, next steps to creating a data strategy, or even looking at what we can actually bring forward, or who else we can engage with regards to data. We're really looking again now that from the learnings that we've taken from data maturity, how can we keep the conversations going? How can we take our recommendations to the particular services? And really build up the next steps and the momentum and learning regarding the data that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. There are some questions already appearing in the Q&A, which is great. Please do have a look at those and add any if you have, but I'm going to use my chair's prerogative to ask the questions that I'm interested in first. So the first thing that occurred to me is two of you used the specific word transformation, and Jonathan was also talking about kind of change in the organization. So I'm interested in the degree to which framing transformation as data is sensible, and does it conflict with other, people wanting to transform their organizations in all sorts of different ways? So is data the best way to do it? Is it just another way to do it? Who would like to start with that? Rob's put his hand up, so we'll go with him first.
Yeah, happy to, Ben. Yeah, I think from our point of view, there's just been a huge technological change recently. So there was inevitable kind of transformation required there, the hybrid working, the working from home, and I think just generally the sort of digital skill set required to kind of do your job effectively. We piggybacked off of that, not that we had a discrete digital transformation agenda here, but there's definitely been things that have sort of collided and kind of progressed under that banner. The data seemed to be an element of that in order to be able to do your work smarter and quite possibly to automate practices and to work from stronger evidence bases, we would be able to kind of deliver our transformation aligned with the sort of technological piece.
Sally, do you have a perspective on this?
Yes, I do, actually. I think digital transformation is something that has been happening for quite a long time in the public sector. Basically, looking at new systems, new platforms, new ways of delivering services. And the kind of Trojan horse in it all has been the data, which is actually driving the digital transformation, but it tends to be not talked about, or previously has not been talked about in quite the same way. I think that's changing. I think data transformation is a term we should be using. It's about transforming organizations. But what I would say is that really it should be, in a perfect world, it should be integrating with digital transformation, so that you tend to see with some organizations what they're writing aren't data strategies, they're writing digital strategies, but the data is within that. It's actually the change that has to happen with the data. I would probably push it a little bit harder than that and say that to actually get the most out of your data, you do need to transform practices, processes, how you think about data to make it really effective. It's maybe just a language thing. It's do you want to call it data transformation so that people think about it like digital transformation? Do you want to talk about data maturity instead? I think it's what's comfortable in your organization to talk about. That's what I would say.
I'd also like to know Jonathan's perspective, but I have a specific question as well, so I don't know if these will map in together. But you were talking a lot about data maturity being assessment being a way of having conversations, introducing yourselves to different services. So why did you need the data maturity assessment to do that? Why not just phone them up and say, we'd like to come and talk to you?
To be honest, it was a very accessible way in of the conversations. Again, over the last 3 years in particular, as mentioned, we've had particular challenges regarding data. But as an authority, we haven't had a unified conversation or a unified engagement regarding data. It's been very siloed, and a lot of our data remains siloed. So really and it wasn't to be surreptitiously trying to get data maturity under the radar and such. It was a really good opportunity to say, let's assess and look back at where we've been over the last few years. What can we really do to benefit the local authority and generate those levels of conversation? And just picking up on Sally and Robert's piece about data and transformation, Stirling Council itself is currently going through what I will call a digital transformation. We have a project that's going through where a number of key service areas and systems are being revamped and basically centralized. But one of the particular areas that hasn't been truly discussed from the outset was data. And again, using the conversations regarding data maturity and data standards, we've actually been able to elevate and articulate to key members of our ERP the importance of data, because originally it was just seen that digital transformation and system transformation will drive change, but because of these conversations, it's actually data that will drive change. It's the systems that will actually then support the data that we require. So it's been really beneficial, and I'm more than happy to call data transformation absolutely key.
Excellent. I'm going to start to bring in some questions from the audience, and I've just pressed a button to say I was going to answer them live, and that's made them vanish. So I'm going to, no, they are there. It's all right. Sorry. It's very professional. So these are two questions seem to be linked and kind of flow on from this discussion. So one is from Leah Lockhart, who says, I'm interested in the unexpected things you found in your data maturity work. For example, any areas where people were working in ways that might be aligned with data transformation, but don't call it that, or maybe they don't even talk about data, or nice homegrown tools or hacks you found along the way. And then I think related to that, from Anam Baig, how do you share and elevate best practice that you find in specific services, which could be relevant in other parts of the organization? And then I guess from Sally's point of view, you've got that between organisations as well. So that's quite a lot of words there. Any volunteers to have a first go at that?
I'm happy to share the how we shared our best practice and probably give a little bit of thought as to what we found that was unexpected. So perhaps if I start in the reverse, I think we'd forecast that the data maturity assessment was going to give us kind of insights that some of which we weren't familiar with, but effectively I think we knew that we needed to be showcasing our data and analysis better. You know, I said at the beginning we had lots of data, and I think kind of established practices, but we hadn't kind of used that data slightly smarter to kind of showcase how it can be used opportunistically to answer questions that people hadn't assumed data could. So we started off on a whole series of exemplars, trying to kind of pick those that were transferable to other service areas. So it is automation, it is kind of visualizing data in dashboards, and doing things that are fairly common opportunities across service areas. So I think, you know, that was something that we're just able to kind of share what we felt was best practice, and in a way that suited our audiences here. So again, just, you know, perhaps as an organization we're more sort of on the tactical and operational kind of delivery side of local government, and we're able to kind of give, you know, provide dashboards that give that level of insight, and that became kind of a cascading opportunity really. Then, you know, the advocacy built up, and we're able to then sort of solve simple things for new teams using examples of kind of best practice that we've got from elsewhere. And of course, you know, externally too. And I think just before starting this call, I just received an email from another local authority that were also kind of pursuing an exemplar around cost of living and fuel poverty, and so it helped to kind of reach out for best practice to kind of then federate around our own organization. So yeah.
Sally, I'm particularly interested in the idea of sharing, because you've worked with cohorts of different public bodies. So have you found things in one public body that has been shared with others?
Okay, so there's two things I'd like to talk about briefly is some of the key findings we've got from the two cohorts, which I think might be of interest to people attending. I would caveat that, though, that it depends. The approaches to assessments in all the organisations are not the same. Some are across an organisation, some are targeted. And I would also say that for most of the organisations, it's data people that respond more. So there's a bit of subjectivity in there. But having said that, we use personas across the assessments to get an idea of the range of people who were taking part for the organisations as well as for ourselves. So first thing to say is there's a lot of staff time being used working on data, around half, so just over 50% of time. Now the interesting thing about that is, what is that time? What is it being spent on? I'm sure people here could hazard a guess about what most of the time is. But we also have the problems about tools. So there are more tools for collecting and storing than for analysing and reporting. That's coming through. The analysis levels tend to be a lower level of use of advanced analytic techniques, which again is spilling into skills, so that people may feel or don't have right skills and capabilities, so they can maximise the use of the data. There's definitely room for more leadership. Leaders may be agreeing it's an organisational priority without backing it up with plans and investment. Data organisations maybe don't know where their data assets are or who's responsible for them, and feel really confident about the quality of their data. And finally, culture tending to be more strong in areas of security and protection rather than openness and sharing. But I would like to go on, Ben, and say that obviously there's an advantage to running cohorts, and we're already beginning to see that, which is exchange of knowledge and people actually sharing. They're sharing experiences, they're sharing techniques they're using. They even did that for assessing their assessments. They shared approaches they'd taken. And I think there's a huge opportunity there opening up for people to do that. And Scottish Government have set up a community of practice where they've got data practitioners talking and sharing knowledge as well, which seems to be quite an effective way to do it. I haven't got anything off the top of my head to share as such, which I know Leah might be more interested in. But I think what's interesting is you give people the opportunity. They have lots of skills and knowledge to share. They maybe don't think they have, but they actually have. And I think that's an interesting point as well, which works both ways. So that when people carry out assessments, and Ben will know this as well, the results are often coming back higher than the teams have expected, the project teams. And our own feeling about that is that people don't know what the potential is of data. If things are working reasonably well, they're happy. They think that's fine, where there might be lots of ways to improve what they're doing and to free up their time to do more work, or to actually carry out some more insight that's going to provide really more information for people making decisions. But I think that people don't know what they don't know, so that's actually really difficult. But I think the other side of that, as I've just said, is that people also don't know they have got real skills to share. So I think the cohorts give people that opportunity to share that knowledge. And we're definitely seeing that happen. And we're looking forward to the third cohort for that, one of the many reasons we are.
What about Stirling? Is that did your experience reflect either of those?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll condense it down a little bit, but yeah, in terms of perhaps officer time, a lot of our data initially, when we started these conversations, a lot of people assume and associate data with reporting rather than perhaps operational data, and a lot of time is expended on just producing reports. A lot of time, is expended as well in sourcing data. So what I've actually tried to do, and this is perhaps the particular pathway I've taken because of my experience within GIS and asset management for a number of years, is to actually develop a series of products taking data and not just producing map outputs, but saying that we've got good practice, we've got a lot of data that's here, but we can actually build additional insights into the information that we've got quite easily. And in terms of that development of people's skills, people's ideas, I've created an environment where they began to feel that they've got a little bit more confidence. So they're not just focusing on, let's say, producing information for reports, but they're seeing what else is actually out there and other particular sources. And because I can actually see what's being created within the platform, if I do see good practice or if I do see innovation, I'm more than happy to promote that as well, because that level of learning, that level of sharing really starts to, and it's quite amazing how it sort of cascades. It really starts to prick other people's interest in what data can do as well, and it generally as well makes data feel a lot more accessible and not so frightening. And yeah, shared resources, shared opportunities really does start to lessen the load.
I'm just going to stay with you for a moment because there's a couple of questions which are diving into data. And as a data architect, I'm sure you definitely want to talk about that. So an anonymous person asks, how did you determine what your organization's critical data was? And Marion Evans asks, what have you seen to be the biggest differences about data in government compared to other sectors?
Good question. To be honest, and I'm not diving the question at all, but in terms of critical data sets, I think as an organization, we've yet to find our feet on that one. There's obviously a number of statutory data sets that we need to provide, which we do, which in themselves have actually come back through the data maturity processes as requiring improvement themselves. But in terms of perhaps how we basically communicate the importance of some of these key data sets, for example, addressing or even streets, they seem very simple data, but for us the foundation of all the information that we have, and it's trying to expand on that. If we know where a person is, we know how they relate to a particular area or the community or the particular services that receive, and starting to build up those particular key data sets and looking at people within our communities. So yeah, we are at a very early stage at really identifying those and again sharing that knowledge and communication across the organization of just the importance of these key data sets. And again, it's trying to take it away from just solely being reporting data, but actually operational data. And in terms of the difference between private and public sector data, apart from the commercial side of things, I think that commercial, public sector data are all obviously, it's very focused on delivering services. I do see, from a private point of view, that there's a lot of commercial opportunity with public sector data. However, I don't think the public sector fully appreciate the value of the data that they perhaps produce. But yeah, in terms of private sector data, to be honest, I don't have that much experience of it. I just know the challenges of perhaps having a more open and shared environment with the private sector is a particular challenge.
Ben, I think I can come in on the critical data. Just thanks to some of Jonathan's hints there, and I think probably similar circumstance with us really is that we'd perhaps done the information asset registers, and IT knew which systems we'd have the sort of highest priority for recovery in a disaster situation. So I think we knew generally kind of where important data sets were located, for perhaps legal and operational reasons. But I think part of our data maturity assessment was to broaden that understanding, widen the definition, like I said, and encourage people to think about the rest of the data they maintain and perhaps what isn't available to us. I think as Jonathan highlighted, didn't appear to be available to us. We've got telemetry from whole fleets of bin lorries and so forth, and no one's utilizing that stuff. So the stuff that we've not tapped into yet. So I think the data maturity assessment kind of allowed us just to sort of broaden people's understanding, and kind of eventually we're working on a journey now to sort of reprioritize the sort of way in which we manage our data.
I have a question for you, Sally. Would you have anything to say about data?
I was going to just put a wee footnote on this, which is, in my own experience over the years, I would think one of the major issues that we have is people not thinking beyond primary use of data. So what I would say about that is that you've got data owners who have created data sets and manage it for particular purposes. But it's actually very difficult to get people to think beyond that and actually think about, if you like, cross-referencing use. I mean, obviously some people are doing that, but it's interesting to discover that people don't understand the value of what they are actually managing and how it could be maximized. And I mean that on an operational level as well as anything strategic. So that was just the point that I was going to make.
Excellent. In fact, I'm not going to ask the question I was going to ask before. I'm going to ask Juliet Whitworth's question, because this flows on from, this is more about data, and we're all data people. I'm interested in whether any of the panelists have used the results of their data maturity assessments to move into the realm of data linking of data in different systems, or have the results meant you focus mainly on improving the basics? Anyone linking their data?
I suppose we've probably got one. So, Julia, as I'd said, out of our data maturity assessment, we then realized areas, we realized corporately we wanted to utilize and analyze our data more. So we embarked on a series of case studies, kind of showcases, exemplars, to kind of showcase that. And I think one of them was around, actually two of them were around automation. And it was kind of the routine, reasonably high frequency shoveling around of information that a person would have done had we not kind of automated the process. And I believe in both cases, off the top of my head, it was in order to unite information. I think one is probably a topical area, but to unite vulnerable people data. So we're still sort of in the COVID recovery phase, plus we'd ordinarily had for emergency preparedness a vulnerable person register, but to begin to automate more of that and to show how that can save hours of people's time. And then I think the other one was being able to prepare a list of stakeholders for communication and consultations that had, based upon the characteristics that we knew about those, kind of more in an automated way, whereas our research officer previously had to sort of refine that data themselves. So I think some of the automated processes we used to sort of showcase the opportunity of data, that was highlighted as a way in which we use information better.
I just quickly just sort of expand and then duplicate as well just what Robert said, that when I mentioned earlier about creating a series of data products, it's exactly the approach that we've taken. So it might seem obvious to data practitioners that joining your corporate address gazetteer with school catchment areas, with indices of multiple deprivation to well-being information seems very obvious to you. However, to other services, they might have not put these data sets together, or if they had been, they would have been struggling to produce that type of information. So yeah, introducing ETL tools and transformation tools, we can basically pre-populate or try and pre-populate certain answers or pieces of information that our services want. And again, it's lifting the load from them to look at, we can join your data sets together as long as there's a commonality there. And again, that then brings in the conversation of, your data standards, and again, brings back the conversation regarding data maturity, that if we structure our data together, we know from, back to GIS, we know from a spatial point of view, there's a relationship to the services and the places and the people we deliver services to. But equally, if we build the data correctly, we can build that relationship in the data as well. And we can have multiple data sources all working together to give that increased level of insight, which in turn, helps lift perhaps some of the struggles within services, but also increases the insight. And one of the things I do quite like is actually taking quite disparate data sets and putting them together and coming up with particular results. And it's not overly analyzing them, but maybe just taking it to a service and say, look, if we do this with your data, this is something else that you can actually look at to have a conversation, either with your service users or internally to look at the opportunities of service delivery itself. And just back as well to another point Robert made earlier, we're really using as well our data maturity to advance that, again, that level of conversation. But our next steps is to perhaps undertake a data audit where we actually look at the systems and the data that services are producing, and really just fully get a good picture of what's actually out there in the landscape that's out there within our authority.
Okay, great. We've got 3 questions from the audience in the Q&A, so let's go through those. They're not. I've been trying to work out a way to bring them all together into a scene, but they're all very different. So we're going to start with someone from Anonymous. What has your experience been in the issue with people misappropriating data/digital/statistical methods in these processes? An example is I have a lot of experience where senior leaders are looking for coefficients that really slow down development, as well as making the final report hard for many to understand or use. Anyone misappropriating data, digital and statistical methods in your organizations?
I can't say we had any experience. I mean, I think, as I said earlier, it's important to make sure that I kind of understood the senior interest in this. So we had a very good stakeholder that would give me a viewpoint as to how important they found this process. But I think we found sufficient hooks. There was important strategies that had already outlined our longer term and connected ambitions in this area. And then, the actual process itself is straightforward and transparent. I think we promoted it to staff in a very simple way. We presented feedback, again, as transparently as possible, including the report itself, which is in a very friendly and online format, interactive as well, with in terms of being able to see the different dimensions of maturity. So not something I experienced.
Okay. This one you definitely will all have an opinion on. James Bowles asked, agree that getting senior buy-in before the assessment is key. how did you position the assessment as being beneficial in order to get buy-in? And I'm particularly interested in Sally's experience here, because I assume Scottish Government isn't phoning up chief executives and saying you've got to do a data maturity assessment. So you have to encourage people to go and get senior buy-in in their organisations, or maybe not. So let's start with Sally, since I've introduced that.
Yes, you're quite right, Ben. It's one of the things. It's one of the really first questions that we ask people coming to do the assessment is: have you got buy-in? Have you got senior buy-in? Have you got a mandate? Is something Rob's mentioned already. I think getting buy-in is a very hot topic for the public sector, not just for assessments. But I think it's a hot topic because it is difficult to articulate the value that data brings to decision making, service planning, future development. Data is so integral to all of this. It's sort of wrapped inside the very foundations of the thinking and planning required, which makes it really difficult to articulate. But I think what we tend to recommend to people, which I know isn't exactly what James asked, but we know that people have done this, is they've aligned with organisation priorities and integrated data into programmes and project roadmaps. They may be doing this in a small way, they may be doing it for one aspect of their work, but it's a way of raising awareness and getting that buy-in they need. But they as well might do something to actually raise awareness about data, so they might concentrate on data governance as a way to do that. And we do say to people taking part, you know, when we're talking to them early, we're sort of saying to them, what have you done already? You know, how have you raised awareness? In our first cohort, one organisation did a data awareness campaign after they'd done the assessment, and they said that they wished they'd done it first, because obviously it completely changed people's knowledge about data in the organisation. So I think it is really important, but there are many ways to do it. And I think that's answered the question.
Jonathan, do you?
To be honest, and it will seem a little bit, I am not joking about this. Basically, I bored people to death about it. Yeah, it was a long, slow process to get overall buy-in. It was slowly chipping away at basically some elements of our management structure. But eventually, you know, we could see, or they began to learn the virtues of, starting our data maturity journey. And yeah, it was really just trying to be as simple as possible with our language. You know, and really just, it was a sales pitch and pestering.
Okay, and I think this will be the final word from the panel. So, Robert.
Well, we got buy-in. I think we're a small organisation, so it's not a great difficulty in sort of penetrating that organisation. Compelling examples, I think, of why data was important. One particular head of service was reluctant for their staff to spend period of time filling in the survey, you know, so perhaps they might have wanted to represent the viewpoint, but not from all their staff. I'm pleased it worked the other way around, because the bottom-up approach was really very valuable to inform management. But we began to give examples of why that's really valuable to their service area, and that proved really great time well spent. Later on, as they became a very keen advocate, after we were showcasing some very simple quick wins with data. So I know that came after asking them to complete the survey, but you know, if you can elicit some of these challenges or reluctance to complete a survey to begin with, and you know, begin to offer some very quick and simple solutions to their ordinary service needs, but through the lens of data, and I think that can help build advocacy and support.
Okay, that's great. There are still questions in the queue, but I'm very sorry. I think we're going to have to wrap things up there. So first of all, I'd like to thank on your behalf Sally, Jonathan and Rob for giving us the benefit of their time and their experience. And I'd like to thank everybody who's attended and chipped in questions and chipped in the chat. We recorded this session and the video should go up tomorrow, he says, looking at Libby to see how she reacts to that. Yes, that's fine. And everybody who signed up should get an email with that link on there. I just flag up, if you enjoyed this event, we have a couple of more events that you might like. Tomorrow, we have a course preview of a course we're running on data for non-profit leaders. So do sign up for that on our events page. And then in May, we have a workshop. Rob is a big fan of our Data Folk Club workshops, which are not webinars. They're very interactive. And we'll be focusing on career paths for data folk and non-profits. If you go to our website, you'll be able to sign up to our newsletter or send us messages and see lots of resources. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your time, panel. And that's it. Goodbye.